If there's one thing that frustrates me in video games, it's getting lost. Few things are more aggravating than wanting to progress and having no idea where to go, and ultimately being unable to without looking up some sort of a guide. That's why I have a profound adoration for games that make getting lost fun. It's extremely difficult to make a world that feels compelling enough to explore and potentially get lost in, but by the time I finished the brief tutorial, I knew Sundered had created just such a world. The latest entry from Thunder Lotus Games, Sundered is best described as a Metroidvania. All of the classic components of a Metroidvania are there. Side-scrolling, platforming, exploring, you name it. But what really sets Sundered apart from other titles in the genre is the art style. What makes it so unique? Much like their previous game, Jotun, all of the animations are hand-drawn, so visually, the game is a treat to look at. This hand-drawn art style makes the game feel unique right from the intro. I'm a sucker for hand-drawn art and animation as is, but I truly think that in this case it takes what could have been just another Metroidvania and turned it into something marvelous. There was almost always something happening on my screen that made me stop and think, my god, that looked incredible. As Esh, the main character, you must push through various stages, all while battling waves of enemies, with the ultimate goal of discovering relics, harnessing their power, and taking down some gigantic bosses. The stages are a mix of procedurally generated and static levels, which create a unique experience every time you visit a certain area, whether you're working your way back after a death, or if you've just started a new playthrough. Unfortunately, it seems as if the procedurally generated sections utilize a lot of the same assets, and accordingly some of the sections look very similar, which can make the player feel like they're walking in circles if they're not paying attention to their map. But as with any good Metroidvania, your map is your best friend. You will constantly be checking your map for rooms you haven't explored, places you might be able to progress further now that you have a new ability, and the most efficient way to get back to where you were just before you met your untimely end. Because you will die. A lot. I mentioned waves of enemies earlier, and I was not exaggerating. At seemingly random times, you'll find yourself with a horde of enemies rushing toward you. If you run, they will follow you, at least for a while, so the most viable option is to turn and face them. It's moments like this where the game goes from a normal Metroidvania to some sort of side-scrolling hack and slash, if ever there were such a thing. Despite this, you won't get by simply spamming your attacks as you might in a traditional hack and slash. Enemies can charge up and release more powerful attacks, and with the amount of enemies that can engage you at one time, you can die pretty quickly if you're not careful, so staying mobile and dodging attacks is key. Fortunately, the game's responsive controls and fast-paced movement make avoiding enemies easier, but staying alive is still a challenge. If you do die, though, it's not the end of the world. As you progress through the world, you'll find yourself gathering shards from various containers, such as crates and corrupted treasures. These shards can be used to flesh out the skill tree found at the Sanctuary, allowing you to upgrade your armor, shield, health, and other various attributes. You can return to the Sanctuary at any time, but you'll also be teleported back to the Sanctuary upon death. I'm stubborn and don't necessarily want to rush back to the Sanctuary every time I've gathered shards, so dying went from a moment of frustration to a humbling moment of, yeah, I probably should have gone back and made some upgrades before I went in there. The game's soundtrack focuses on more ambient, atmospheric tones that fit the overall feel of the world. There's clearly more to the world than the player knows at the beginning, and while the story is uncovered throughout the game, there's an eerie, mysterious quality surrounding you that's only enhanced by the music. It's unsettling when it needs to be, it picks up when the action does, and even though you may not notice it in the moment, if you stop and listen, you'll realize just how much it adds. Touting 15 hours of gameplay, multiple endings, hundreds of upgrades, and numerous ways to build out your character with the skill tree, Sundered will not only provide anyone who loves Metroidvanias with satisfying combat, movement, and exploration, it also provides true completionists with incentive to revisit the game again and again. Sundered is available now on PC and PlayStation 4 with a discounted price of $17.99 until August 4th, at which time it will be $19.99. If you're on the fence, the price tag may deter you from biting the bullet on the purchase, but if you're a fan of the genre, it's worth picking up, even if that means waiting for a sale. For more reviews on video games and hardware alike, as well as first looks, editorials, and build guides, be sure to head on over to KBMOD.com.